What can technologies of the past tell us about technology in the future? Can we look to the past and see what AI is going to do? Let's talk about that. So, my name's Marty Milligan. I've been in technology for 40 years. I've worked for big companies like EDS, where I helped some of the largest insurance companies in the country develop new technologies and integrate it into their business. And I've worked for the government, places like NOAA did advanced technology and advanced computing to handle all of the data that comes from the latest generation of weather satellites. Now, I'm on a mission to help small businesses adopt AI and do so in a non-disruptive manner that makes the most out of it. So everybody is worried that we're in a big AI bubble, that the technology is never going to live up to all of its promises. And everybody would like to know, is that true? Or is AI actually going to be everything that we say it's going to be? So before we answer that, let's take a look at the pattern that technologies normally follow as they're rolled out. So the pattern usually follows the same basic steps. The new technology gets developed and we make a lot of optimistic predictions about how it's going to be used in industry and people's private life and government and basically the way the world is going to change based on this new technology. And over time, that bubble of optimism meets reality and a lot of problems creep in to its adoption and we come back down to reality. And then over time, once we've kind of reset our expectations and people start taking it from a leading edge technology to something that's a little more mainstream, all of a sudden a lot of the problems and the things that tempered our enthusiasm for it are dealt with, and then the technology becomes more popular and all of a sudden it starts solving problems we didn't anticipate, and the long-term implications of the technology tend to be much greater than it was originally anticipated. So the initial short-term view is eclipsed by a much bigger long-term effect. There's a famous quote by economist Paul Krugman where he said that he anticipated that the internet will be beneficial, but it won't be much more beneficial than, say, the fax machine. And that was proven to be very wrong, and it has a big impact on our life that we never could have anticipated. So the pattern is initial optimism and elation and wild predictions, followed by a period of realism and tempered expectations, followed by an unexpected period of greater adoption and new problem solving and new adoption and unpredicted results. And then as they've become more ubiquitous in life, they've had a big impact on us. So will AI follow that same type of pattern? And I think the answer is we're already starting to see it follow that pattern. Every few years over the last half century almost, there have been breakthroughs in AI that look like they're going to be the big commercial success. And almost all of them meet with some limitations that cause them to show that the technology isn't quite ready for broad adoption. We had learning systems, we've had rule-based systems, we've had expert systems, all in the past, and they've all had very niche solutions, and the initial projections of these things having wide adoption and solving broad problems never came to fruition. In this case, we've had major breakthroughs as the large language models and the generative models have kind of been rolled out over the last 5 or 6 years, and we're starting to see that these things actually do have broad appeal and broad applicability to people's lives and to business in general. So from that perspective, in this case, it looks like we actually have an initial hype bubble that is large enough and sustained enough that people are actually starting to adopt the technology. And in fact, it's actually starting to enter the realistic phase where we're starting to see the limitations of the technology. We're starting to see where it may or may not be useful. Some of the places where the initial elation was a little bit premature. We're starting to see the social effects. All of those things are starting to temper what the expectations of AI are going to be. So for example, we're seeing a lot of social disruption from AI as we're starting to just get into the job loss phase. So every technology has a little bit of a job loss phase, and we need to expect that anything we do is initially going to have a negative effect on jobs. And this is because in order for a technology to be adopted, it has to have some productivity enhancements. And those productivity enhancements are going to cause a lower need for labor. But that lower need for labor generally doesn't last. What happens is the new tool makes people more productive. And so that additional productivity means that we can do the things that we've always been doing with fewer people. However, each hour of human labor is now more productive. So we can now do things that used to be cost prohibitive. This more productive human labor allows us to unlock things that were heretofore not economically viable. Well, now we can have an AI 24-hour help desk, and we can do it in English as well as Spanish or any other language that we need to support. And all of a sudden that becomes something we need. And in supporting that, we're going to have some new jobs. So initially you're going to start seeing some jobs shrink, and then we're going to start seeing some jobs grow. And that's a real phenomenon. It's called the Jevons paradox, discovered by William Stanley Jevons back in the 1800s when he was looking at coal consumption during the Industrial Revolution in England. As the steam engines became more efficient, coal consumption went up and not down. We see this a lot with labor. Every time a new labor-saving device comes out, there's a effect on jobs initially, but long-term, we tend to create a lot of new jobs because of it. Could this time be different? Maybe, but I wouldn't bet on it. So what's with all of the job layoffs that we're starting to see that are being blamed on AI? Well, at face value, I would say, okay, probably some of these are due to AI, but some of them are probably due to businesses being overstaffed. So businesses tended to not want to lose their staff. And when we got into COVID, it was very hard to replace your staff. So businesses were reticent to start downsizing and run tight staff. So right-sizing your staff is something that's very important to do. But it's a much better story to tell that you're implementing technology and you're laying off staff for that, instead of we're overstaffed for the amount of business that we're doing. So from that perspective, I think the AI job loss is a little bit exaggerated, but it's probably real. Another thing that we're starting to see that's a social cost is a lot of data center construction. And while AI gets blamed for a lot of the AI data center construction, and rightfully so, because we do need a lot of new compute resources to handle the AI rollout, there are a lot of other cloud technologies that also are coming along with it. You're also seeing a lot of complaints about how much electricity use that data centers are going to require, but they're still going to be using less electricity than many other industries. The reason we're starting to see the problems with electricity has more to do with the underinvestment in the electric grid over the last 20 years. A lot of utilities in the country have kind of had a model that has projected that they will have flat demand going forward, when you can attribute the flat demand that they've experienced to a lot of one-time energy improvements. So we've moved to LED lighting and higher efficiency appliances and a lot of those things that we can't do again. So the pickup in energy demand was going to happen anyway, and a lot of the grid didn't really anticipate that was going to happen, and AI is getting blamed for a lot of that. And over time, it's going to get addressed. There will probably be less opposition to data center construction. We're starting to hit the negative story of AI. You're also starting to see AI implementations that don't deliver the promises that people anticipated, and that's not completely unexpected. A lot of times, we make a lot of these unrealistic projections. We're during the euphoria phase. Realistically, you do see a 30 to 70% improvement in productivity for your white collar knowledge workers, that's not the same as we're going to replace all of our lawyers. So a lot of the hype caused a lot of unrealistic projections. Additionally, with AI, you're going to see something very similar to the personal computer adoption in the 80s and the 90s, when everybody was able to have their own spreadsheets and create their own documents and do their own editing. There were a lot of things that we could do and we were doing now for free because the software allowed us to do infinite spreadsheets, infinite documents, whereas in the past those things were very expensive to do. People just weren't doing it. So there was a lot of creation happening that was never done before, but it's very hard to put those things into GDP because things that weren't happening and things that are now doing for very low cost aren't going to be picked up in GDP numbers. In fact, during the 80s and 90s, there was a common expression that computers were everywhere except GDP. So we're going to see a lot of that with AI, where AI is everywhere. It's going to be used for a lot of things, but a lot of the benefits are going to be very intangible, but a lot of the things we do with it seem to be free. So a lot of companies are not going to be able to do that. So again, we're going through that realistic phase right now, and that's really a good thing because it means a lot of people are now starting to adopt the technology. We're solving a lot of the problems. And as more and more people start using it, we're going to start doing these unanticipated solutions are going to start to evolve and get rolled out. And the things we couldn't anticipate and the things that we didn't even envision during that initial bubble are going to start becoming real, and they're going to start hitting us in the next 4 or 5 years. Short-term impacts are never what we anticipate they're going to be, and the long-term impacts are far greater than what we could anticipate. So from that perspective, I think we're kind of going to say that AI is going to be like those prior technologies, as it's going to follow the same pattern. I think we're going to see a lot more difficulty during the realism phase. It's going to be a lot more painful, a lot more difficult. It's a worldwide market, not just a country market. So the adoption is going to be very broad across all categories of business, across all countries. So as we start getting into that unexpected growth phase that comes after the realistic phase, I think that's going to be far larger than any other technology in the past. That's going to be an explosion of productivity, and unanticipated goods and services are going to start coming out in the next 4 or 5 years. But from where I sit and all of my experience with different technologies over the last 40 years, I think that's kind of where AI is going. I think it's going to be, I think that we're in for a very rough patch of solving problems and backing and filling and addressing all of the difficulties over the next 3 or 4 years. And I think the broader adoption is going to be bigger and more impactful than it has been in any other technology.